4 years ago, I found myself sitting on the same blue couch on which I had sat every Thursday for the last 4 years. Across from me sat my nutritionist, Laura. It was our last session before I embarked on my next big adventure, college graduation and the big move to New York City. I remember saying to her, I just wish I could have had someone to look to. Someone who was not on the other side of all this, but someone who was actively fighting to put themselves first in an industry that often tells us not to. She looked at me and she said, well, why can't that be you? Why can't that be you? I didn't know it then, but those 5 words would ultimately change the trajectory of my life. But before we get into all of that, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Kara. I use she, her pronouns, and I, amongst many other things, am a theater kid. You know that dun 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 sound that you hear when the villain is introduced in an action movie? Yeah, that's essentially what I expect to hear when those words come out of my mouth. I was raised by a soprano and a tenor, my mother and father. I received my first pair of tap shoes at age 3, knew every word to the You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown soundtrack at age 4, and after landing the coveted role of Molly in the local recreation department production of Annie, the rest was history. Now, do I have any other theater kids in the house today? Okay. Well, hey, listen, even if you have never stepped foot on a stage before, I want you to think back to a time in your childhood when you fell so feverishly in love with something. Whether it be your first soccer game, art class, chess match, anything. I want you to think back to that time that made you think to yourself, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Well, that is how I felt the first time I stepped foot on stage. I was quite literally born for it. Fast forward a few years, and I'm sure we all remember, or may have suppressed, the incredibly anxiety-inducing process that is applying for colleges. My senior year, I was faced with one of the most daunting and pivotal, life-changing tasks that a young actor can face, the college audition process. This is another instance where I expect to hear that dun 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 sound. My senior year of high school, I auditioned for a whopping 17 schools, most of which had a 0.4% acceptance rate. Thankfully, I was lucky enough to secure a spot at one of my absolute dream schools, and everything felt like it was falling into place perfectly. I was the perfect girl who got into a perfect school and was making her dreams come true. Everything was perfect. I was perfect. But perfection often functions like a two-way mirror. One side of the mirror showing us what we want to see, while also simultaneously hiding what is actually there. On the other side of my mirror was anorexia. My junior year of high school, I was formally diagnosed with an eating disorder after years of struggling in silence. While I was auditioning for schools, I was also spending 3 to 5 days a week in an intensive eating disorder treatment program. Thankfully, after months of therapy and countless doctor's appointments, I was given the go-ahead by my treatment team to embark on this next adventure and chase my dreams of being an actor at college head-on. But something that no one tells you about recovery is that as your life begins to evolve, your eating disorder often evolves with it. And it was my first year at school that my eating disorder took on an entirely new life of its own. But August came, I packed up my bags, said goodbye to my tiny little hometown, and dove headfirst into what we lovingly refer to as Broadway school. I was so excited to finally study the things that I was passionate about and fill my days with voice lessons and acting class, dance class, and so much more. Those 4 years shaped me into the performer that I am today, and for that, I am eternally grateful. But it was here at school that I really got my first glimpse into what our industry was actually like. I began to see past the bright lights of the stage and the Broadway.com vlogs, and I got my first real sense of what it took to be a working professional in our industry. So today, instead of telling you about all of the lessons that I have had to learn in order to get to where I am today, I want to focus on one of the biggest things that I have had to unlearn in my journey to becoming not just the performer I am today, but the human that I am today. And that lesson is as follows. If you are not working yourself into the ground, then you are not working hard enough. We as artists have mastered the art of self-destruction. What I mean by this is that we as an industry and the institutions that we have built surrounding it have gotten so good at not taking care of ourselves and making it look glamorous. Let me take you through an average day in the life of a student studying to get their BFA in music theater at a liberal arts college. The day starts around like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning when you wake up for your first class of the day, which happens to be an hour and a half of ballet at 8 o'clock in the morning. You then have 15 minutes to run across campus to your French class, which is then immediately followed by your weekly 1-hour voice lesson. After your voice lesson, you head to your last class of the day, acting. You'd think the day would be over, right? Wrong. After acting, you head to rehearsal for one of the 3 projects that you are potentially involved with, or if you have time, you hit the practice rooms to work on your upcoming summer auditions or rep for your vocal lessons, and then you finish off the day back in your dorm room studying for your upcoming calc exam as you drift off to sleep, wake up the next morning, and do the whole thing all over again. Now this sounds insane. I know, and that's because it is. It quite literally is. And it is not for the faint of heart. While most students were taking 4 classes a semester, you were taking 8. But listen, when you decide to pursue this kind of education, you know exactly what you are getting into. What I was not prepared for was the incredibly competitive environment that this atmosphere would breed. People often describe the students that attend these universities as a bunch of big fishes from small ponds. I want you to imagine 20 sharks who are all some of the best at what they did, where they came from, all dropped into the same puddle. Yeah, as you can imagine, it became quite competitive. I'll never forget the first day that I watched an upperclassman replace lunch with a trip to the gym. I remember so vividly hearing my classmates in the hallway complain that they were so tired that all they had time to eat today was an apple. Only I came to understand that they weren't complaining. It was bragging. They were winning. I soon found myself in a constant swirl of competition, fighting to prove that I was working the hardest. I sought out validation from my peers and my professors that I was doing enough. I began to feel guilty for taking care of myself or prioritizing my other passions that had nothing to do with my degree, and I learned very quickly that success in my field was not defined by my talent, but in the amount of jobs that I had booked for the summer or the amount of numbers I was cast in the spring showcase. I began to prioritize the gym over meals and rehearsal over sleep, and soon anorexia had taken over my life again. You know, something that my eating disorder would always tell me was that even if I couldn't be the best, even if I couldn't be the most talented, that this was something that I could be the best at. And I held on to that like my life depended on it. So something that no one tells you about recovering from an eating disorder while also getting your BFA in music theater is how nearly impossible it seems. Like many others in recovery, I was on a meal plan that was custom tailored to my specific needs by my dietitian. And this meal plan included a minimum of 3 meals and 3 snacks a day. Now, following a meal plan when you are in recovery is hard enough on its own. But when you're in an environment where everyone around you is being rewarded for their own self-destruction, I mean, that's an entirely different ballgame. I remember feeling so guilty and so ashamed when I had to eat my meals and snacks between classes as my classmates just got to go about their days. And I would say this to my nutritionist. I would say, I just don't understand why I have to be eating all this food and everyone else around me doesn't. And every time she would laugh and she would say, Kara, they probably need that snack too. They just don't realize it. And I came to realize that she was right. My senior year, I decided to become a bit more open and honest about my recovery. Something that surprised me, however, was that every time I would share with a classmate that I was having a hard time looking in the mirror in ballet that day, I was almost always met with the same response. Oh, me too. The more I looked around, the more I began to realize that there were dozens of people all around me, just like me, that were suffering in silence. So I kept talking. I kept sharing how I felt with my professors and my peers, and ultimately, I took to social media for the entire world to see. I was astounded at the amount of messages that I was receiving from artists all over the country sharing the same message. Me too. So all of this leads us right back to where we started. Those 5 words that changed my life and are ultimately the reason I am even standing here before you today. Why can't that be you? So in 2022, I decided to become that person that 12-year-old Kara so desperately needed. 2 years and over 200,000 followers later, I have made a career out of sharing my life, my journey as an actor, and most importantly, my journey through mental health on social media. I have made it my mission to become that person who is not on the other side of her recovery, but was choosing it and prioritizing it each and every single day. Now, all of this leads us to one big question. How do we, as an industry, begin to collectively dismantle this culture that we have so carefully cultivated? I truly and wholeheartedly believe that it starts with this next generation of artists. A generation that is sick and tired of being told that we come second in our own lives and careers. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. And it's that putting your health first and your career second is actually what putting your career first looks like. Because there is no career to be had if you are not here to have it. We as an industry and the educational institutions that we have built surrounding it are a breeding ground for eating disorders and mental illness. And we know this. I mean, we are constantly being fed this narrative that our worth and our value and our marketability relies so heavily on the size and shape of our bodies as well as our productivity. So it is our responsibility as creatives and working professionals to not just dismantle this culture, but actively choose to fight against it whenever we are presented with the opportunity. You know, I'd be lying to you if I were to say that these last 2 years sharing my life and my journey and my recovery on social media have been perfect. I'd be lying to you if I were to stand before you today and say that I am fully recovered. And I would be lying to you if I said I do not occasionally mourn the sense of comfort and control that my eating disorder has provided me with in an industry that often makes me feel so small. But the difference now is I can hear my own voice too. The voice of a girl who is not just an actor, but a multifaceted human being. One of my favorite quotes is, "In order to produce live art, we first must live." I believe that this quote truly and wholeheartedly encapsulates everything that I have learned since deciding to put my health and my happiness first, just 2 short years ago. You know, something that we are told as artists is that if we love anything else in this life, that we should do it. That unless we are ready and willing to commit our entire selves, our entire lives to this industry, that we will never make it. That it is a waste of our time. Well, to every artist hearing this right now, I want to let you in on a little secret that those people do not want you to know. And it is that your love and your passion for other things in this life is what makes your art unique. Your art cannot exist without you in it. And you are not an afterthought in your own story. We are taught that this industry is based upon the idea of sacrifice. But it wasn't until I stopped sacrificing my own happiness that the game changed. Thank you.